Let me welcome Jean Ergas, Chief Economist of Tigris Financial Partners. Good evening, Jean, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Always a pleasure. Good evening, Alex.
Well, Jean, Jerome Powell decided a few days ago to keep interest rates steady in the range between 2.5 and 2.25, sorry, and 2.5. He cited that global economic slowdown. On the other side, we are seeing amazing non-farm payrolls data. What is your comment on regarding this topic? Do you think he bought on Trump?
Look, I think the question is very complex. We have to distinguish, first of all, between the U.S. and the rest of the world. This is very important. And secondly, we have to try to understand what is behind the numbers on the jobs, okay, in the U.S. So we have a U.S. phenomenon, which is the jobs, and we have a slowing, which is the rest of the world. I mean, more, let's say, feasible and observable. I think that, first of all, there is a slowing abroad, and we are seeing it in the PMIs. We are seeing it in manufacturing. We are seeing it across different countries. This exists, and it's very well rooted in manufacturing. And we must also know that, in fact, if there's slowing globally, eventually it hits the U.S. On the U.S. jobs, I think there's two things that must be said. First of all, job numbers and GDP growth in the U.S. have long divorced. They have not been sort of in strict correlation and, let's put it this way, in communion with each other. You can have vast amounts of jobs being added, and at the same time, you can have sort of only a modest increase in consumption power, because we have seen in the United States that most of the jobs that have been created have been relatively low-paying jobs. So the equation, jobs plus economy boom, no longer holds. I think this is very important to understand what's actually happening here, that as compared to other countries, advanced economies, the wage disparities in the U.S. are enormous. Yes, there are jobs. Can you live on them? This is the major issue right now. I think that Powell was not completely wrong. I think he's a very smart fellow. I think what Powell was doing was looking at the situation in total from a macro point of view and saying, let us be careful to increase interest rates in the U.S. Why? Because at that point, I mean, you could have a slowing in the U.S. and you could have fewer imports, but some imports will always be there despite Trump's mercantilist rhetoric. And this will actually deal a blow to other economies, which could then lead to a series of cascade of events. The job market here is very complex. Like I said, there's a vast amount of job creation, but one has to see what jobs they are, quite frankly. And one has to see, can wages increase? Because they did some surveys, 50% of Americans do not know where to find $500 in an emergency. So this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at an economy which is volume strong on jobs, cash core at the consumer level, sensitive to interest rates, and in certain sectors, very sensitive to demand from abroad for U.S. products.
And I would like to ask you another question, because Jerome Powell also cited the fact that he is also worried for the data, for the GDP data of the first quarter of 2019,
yes,
because of the shutdown. How much of an impact do you expect from this 35 record shutdown for the U.S.?
Look, I think that we're probably going to be looking, this is my guess off the top of my head, I think we're going to be looking at about 0.25%, quarter to 8%. That would basically be it. I think that some of it will be recouped by sort of the fact that these people will then be paid. They'll spend the money. Some of it will not, because there have been essential services which were not performed, and therefore commerce could not take place, and the deal went. But I don't think it's going to be a major catastrophe. I think people are very focused on the shutdown. The real point is that the U.S. economy was slowing anyways. So we have to distinguish between the one-off effects of the shutdown and of an economy which is slowly going to start coming off the boil. Remember, a lot of people did a lot of capital investment. They front-ran the capital investment because of tax breaks, okay? And now this will obviously start to fade. So a lot of one-off effects we saw in 2018 are going to start fading in 2019. This is very important to remember.
Well, on the other side, we had a very good earnings season, very of the techs, and also the energy companies, as we can see today, ExxonMobil and also Chevron posted very good data. Overall, what is your assessment of this earnings season? I know you don't like very much the tech stocks, but do you expect a better performance in the upcoming quarters?
Look, I think the tech stocks, I'm not an expert on this, I will be very careful what I say. I think these are also companies which are sectors and this way sensitive to other factors which may not strictly be the economic cycle. This is very important. But the real importance of this sector is the fact that so many people own them that if there are disappointments, it creates one-way liquidity events. Okay, I think that they will be facing most probably some regulatory pressure as we go along, and also saturation in certain markets is normal in any cycle. I think overall, their positions will remain fairly solid, most probably in terms of market caps. Though we have seen 30-40% drops, this is not going to be the Polaroid camera which came and went. But I do believe, in fact, that investors should overall be ready for greater volatility in earnings from a macro point of view, because we are steering slowly into a slower growth environment, and in certain sectors, certain regions are very important, and if those regions start to slow, the growth component starts to ebb, and the pricing power starts to ebb. So I think that is really the point. What I have seen from a macro point of view from the earnings season is that there are some macro corporates that have the size of countries, which have been remarkably resilient. Now, will they hold this up in 2019? One does not know. But we are seeing some underlying demand for certain companies, which we thought would have been much, much harder hit by trade disputes.
Well, on the other side, I cannot not to ask you your assessment regarding also Europe. It's pretty complicated situation also in Europe, because euro area posted yesterday 0.2% growth rate quarter over quarter and 1.2% year over year. So what is your assessment of the euro area?
Look, my assessment of the euro area is as follows. First of all, the euro area is composed of many different countries, so I have to look at who we're talking about. I believe, though, that overall the euro area will slow. I believe they have not hit their inflation targets. I believe that euro area is still not generating in certain markets sufficient domestic demand to offset a slowing of exports. It's very important. And I believe also that there are still problems in certain countries with not only unemployment, but with new employment, but at very low wages. And therefore, this is becoming extremely difficult in terms of generating future consumption. We talk a lot about Germany. One of the problems in Germany with the job creation has been that a very large part of these jobs were in very low-paid sectors or low-paid contract types. And therefore, again, we are seeing the Americanization of Europe, where employment is not automatically synonymous with a one-for-one increase in consumption. So that is from that point of view of employment, consumption, GDP side. From a point of view of structural problems, I see few countries that are really tackling them. From a point of view, I would say, of inflation, and this is very important, we're seeing minimal inflation pressures. We saw inflation still way off the 2% target by the ECB. And we're seeing also that the inflation generator appears to be limited to energy, which means that domestic consumption is not playing a role, which I consider to be quite a serious factor, quite frankly. I think Europe will stumble through. My expectations are very low.
Also for the euro against the dollar?
Look, I think euro against the dollar, my view is this. The dollar has been given up for dead I don't know how many times by now. If I listen to certain people, the euro was supposed to be 130 against the dollar at this point. It is not. The euro is trading in a relatively narrow range recently, which I would say goes from like 112.50 to 115. We're now 114, if I'm mistaken, 60 something. This is noise. This is not signal. I believe that, in fact, the last thing the ECB wants at this point is a strong euro, quite frankly. because they need to keep up the exports. Why? Because the domestic demand in certain countries is starting to ebb or is more difficult. And my feeling is that this year the Fed will raise rates at least once. They will be forced to if they get another blockbuster employment number. It's very important. They cannot throw the Phillips curve out the window. They have to rewrite the economics textbook, but it's no longer a simultaneous increase in rates. We have a lag factor now to the Powell decision. So I think that overall, we're going to be looking at like a euro-dollar trading range, I would say between 113 and maybe 116. That is where I see it. I don't see it going to 130. I don't see it going to 125. And I see it possibly for a very short term around this level.
Well, Jean, I would like to go back to the U.S. because we have this news that Senator Cory Booker says he's running for president elections in 2020. The New Jersey Democrats' entrance into the race was widely expected. This is the guy, as we can see from our photo, the charismatic senator and former mayor of Newark, New Jersey, has been crisscrossing key primary states in recent weeks while telegraphing that a decision was coming. Booker, who served as mayor until he was elected to the Senate in 2014, is one of several Democratic senators, including Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Senator Kamala Harris of California, who have their eyes on the 2020 nomination. The Liberal Democrats has been an outspoken critic of President Donald Trump. Of course, he scored a crucial policy victory recently when Congress passed a major piece of bipartisan criminal justice reform that Booker worked closely with Republicans to advance. As we know, a few days ago, we also had Howard Schultz, that the CEO of Starbucks, that said that he is most probably going to run for the presidential elections in 2020. We can see more and more billionaires. I'm talking for the Starbucks CEO. Of course, Senator Cory Booker has a background, a politician in the policy sector, but instead the other one is another billionaire as Donald Trump with not really political background. Do you think we can expect more and more billionaires trying to be a president after they saw that Trump make it 2 years ago, so they think, okay, he make it, I can make it as well. Do you expect this trend in the US?
Look, I think the U.S. has a very ambivalent view towards the very rich, quite frankly. On the one hand, it admires them. On the other hand, it does not like them because they're not like everybody else. I think that Schultz, I saw an interview with him. This is my strictly personal view. I do not believe that this man can carry us off, quite frankly. I think people are rather skeptical at this point of people coming in and saying, I am like you, and then defending their interests. However, the man will give it a shot. My basic feeling is that you will have relatively standard candidates plucked from both fields if we get there. If Trump does not resign, as some are saying that he might here, then probably they will put up Trump again as a candidate. So I think, no, I think the billionaire, non-billionaire issue is not it. It is the extent to which people see viable solutions. And I think many people have been disappointed by this administration, quite frankly, for delivering rhetoric, not necessarily delivering, for example, on the repatriation of jobs to this country as opposed to repatriation of production.
Thank you very much, Jean Ergas, Chief Economist at Tigris Financial Partners. Thank you very much for joining us this Friday evening.
Welcome. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Alexandra.
Have a good evening and have a great weekend. Well.